This is the second video in a series of 6 that I'm making about the Latin adjectives. Once I have made them, and once I've released them, they become, in a sense, your videos, and how you watch them, just as when you watch them, is entirely your business. But I do hope you're watching them in the order that I've recommended. The reason for this is that in the first video I said certain things that I do not plan to repeat. I don't plan to repeat them because if I were to repeat everything across all 6 of these videos, what is already likely to be quite a long series would become still longer. And so, without too much repeating myself, I will now talk, as the title of the video suggests, about the positive degree of comparison. Now, this is a somewhat elaborate name for those adjectives like bad, slow, fast, etc., that simply add additional information to a noun. They add additional information to a noun without trying to compare different nouns. There are, in Latin, 2 kinds of positive adjective. There are those with exactly the same forms, that is, there are those with exactly the same endings as the first and second declension of nouns. An example of this would be bonus, bona, bonum. That is the masculine, the feminine, the neuter. Or we can use the shorthand 2, 1, 2, which is something that I mention now and will explain shortly. And these are the great majority of adjectives in Latin. Then we have a smaller, but still a significant number, that do not have identical, but that do have similar forms to those of the third declension of nouns. For example, there is omnis and omne. I will explain both these forms in more detail very shortly. For the moment, however, I want to clear up one important misconception that many students bring to my attention. Indeed, it is a misconception, I suspect, that many students do not bring to my attention or to the attention of their teachers generally. And this can be a serious barrier to the effective and indeed the enjoyable learning of Latin. For the avoidance of doubt, I will say as clearly as I can that, although there are 2 groups of adjectives in Latin, that is, group 1 adjectives, or those which have identical forms to those of the first and second declensions of nouns, and group 2 adjectives, or those with similar forms to the third declension, there is no difference in function between these 2 groups of adjective. It is possible to combine adjectives from one group with nouns from the other group. Take a look at these examples. Bonus senex, or the good old man. Senex is a third declension noun, but notice that bonus is a group 1 adjective. It is a second declension masculine adjective. I have already in the previous video explained the agreement of nouns and adjectives. I will say something more about this later on in the present video. For the moment, I will say that although bonus and senex are from different groups, bonus being a second declension adjective and senex being a third declension noun, these 2 are in perfect agreement with each other because they are both nominative, they are both masculine, and they are both singular. It's the same with this second example, fortis servus, or the strong slave. Servus is a second declension masculine noun, fortis is a group 2 or a third declension type adjective. But so long as they agree with each other in case, in gender, and in number, they are in agreement. Now, this possible disagreement having been addressed, another ablative absolute here. This possible disagreement having been addressed, let us turn to the forms of the group 1 nouns, or the forms of those adjectives which are identical to the forms of the first and second declensions. We start by setting up the table: singular, plural, and then within each, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative. This is the order of cases that is used in the United Kingdom and that has been used here since the 1860s. It is also used in those countries which are, in whatever sense, descended from the United Kingdom. In the United States and other countries, the cases are in a different order. I'll admit that in those other countries, the cases are in the traditional order given us by the Greek and Roman grammarians themselves. But the order I am using is the order that we have used ever since Benjamin Hall Kennedy imposed his great heavy footprint on the teaching of all inflected languages in the United Kingdom during the 1860s, and that has been hegemonic ever since. Let us take as our example of an adjective in the group 1 category, bonus, or good. We start with the masculine form, and here is the nominative bonus. We pass to the feminine form, bona, and from here we pass to the neuter form, bonum. All of these, bonus, bona, bonum, are nominative singular. Do I need to take you through the other forms one at a time? I don't think so. You may not be very advanced in your study of Latin, but the first and second declensions of nouns should already be burned into your memory. So here they are in one big gush. Notice what I said at the beginning of this video. Group 1 adjectives like bonus, bona, bonum are absolutely identical in their endings to nouns of the first and second declensions. If you know your first and second declensions, and you must do that. If you don't, you must go back now and learn them and then come back to this video. But as long as you know your first and second declensions, you have no further learning to do. There is a straight recycling of endings from first and second declension nouns to group 1 adjectives. This being said, let us move to group 2 adjectives, and we will take as our example fortis, which means strong or brave. As with all third declension nouns, the adjectives of this kind are indifferently masculine and feminine in their forms. That is, you cannot, just by looking at them in themselves, tell the difference between masculine and feminine adjectives in the third declension, or in group 2. There are, of course, differences for the neuter form of the adjective, just as there are differences for the neuter form of third declension nouns. But let us focus for the moment on fortis, here in the masculine and feminine. The nominative is fortis, and here, in another gush, here is the rest of the declension. Notice how, as I said earlier, it is almost, though not quite, identical in its forms to the forms of third declension nouns. The difference is in the ablative singular, which ends for adjectives not in E, but in a long I. This is, by the way, not an invariable rule, but it is very often the case. This much being established, let's have a look at the neuter form of group 2 adjectives. We'll begin by looking at the nominative and accusative, both singular and plural. Notice that rather unpleasant yellow that shows the differences for the masculine and feminine forms and those in the neuter column. This, of course, you see in the adjectives, and I see no need to dwell any further on these differences. So I will proceed to give you the whole of the declension. There it is, no surprises there. If, with the exception of the singular ablative, there are any surprises, my advice, once again, is to go back and look at your third declension nouns. As with group 1 adjectives, or as with first and second declension nouns, the forms of these group 2 adjectives should be burned into your memory. You should look on these, indeed you should look on all of the adjectives in these tables with a certain complacency, telling yourself, this is coming to an end. There is nothing further to be learned so far as the forms of the adjectives are concerned. That is, as I will show later, not entirely the case, but it is substantially the case. There is nothing further for me to tell you about how to recognize the forms of these adjectives. For this reason, let's press on to see what can be said about the use of these adjectives. Let's shift all of the adjectives over to the left to make some writing space for me. I do need to make quite a few notes here. Oh, and before I do start making notes, let me say this. If you look at these tables of adjectives, you'll see that I have marked vowels as long where they are long. When I make my notes, I will generally not do this. I will mark the A in the feminine singular ablative as long, because that is for the avoidance of ambiguity, but for the rest I will not mark long vowels. That, however, is an aside. Let me make my first substantive point. This is for me to ask you to pay close attention to the order of these columns. When you learned the first and second declension of nouns, you learned them in this particular way. First declension feminine, second declension masculine, second declension neuter. The custom where the adjectives are concerned is to list them so as second declension masculine, first declension feminine, second declension neuter. We can abbreviate this. We can call such adjectives 2-1-2 kinds. Since this order applies to many other tables in Latin and in Greek, this is a useful piece of shorthand. So, bonus, bona, bonum. Or these are 2-1-2 adjectives. Or they're listed in most dictionaries thus: bonus a good. But however they are listed, this is how they are. A further point worth making is that adjectives are often used in Latin to say what in English is said with an adverb. Have a look at this. Socrates laetus venenum hausit, or happy Socrates drank the poison. That English translation will not do. I don't think that the literal translation, happy Socrates drank the poison, quite captures what the writer had in mind. A better translation is, Socrates happily drank the poison. A further point, and this follows from what I said in the first video in this series, the default order in English is adjective plus noun. The wicked student, for example. In Latin, the default order is noun plus adjective. That is the default order. Notice my emphasis on default here because there really is no fixed order in Latin. But the default order is noun plus adjective. Discipulus scelestus. Oh, of course. The order of words in a Latin sentence can be very flexible. Look at this. Discipulum scelestum verberavi. I beat the wicked student. But I could also say, scelestum verberavi discipulum. There is no difference in the main meaning of these two sentences, discipulum scelestum verberavi and scelestum verberavi discipulum. I can shuffle the words like playing cards according to where I want the main emphasis to fall. Is this a statement about a student who happens to be wicked, or a wicked student, or according to what sounds better? But as said, the default order is noun plus adjective, except that adjectives of size or quantity, and here are the main ones: magnus, great or big; parvus, small or little; multus, many or much; pauci, few; omnis, all; novus, new. These usually come before their noun. So we have these examples. Magister multos discipulos habet. The teacher has many students. Notice the red adjective comes before the noun that it governs. Or magna pars discipulorum scelesta est. A great part of the students is wicked, or the majority of the students are wicked. I suppose the last point to be made here is that when you are discussing the order of words in Latin, you are for the most part discussing tendencies rather than rules. But these are the main tendencies. Let me now come to the matter of agreement. I have already covered this in the first video, but I will cover it again here. Unlike in English, an adjective must agree with its noun in case, in gender, in number. This is perhaps a fiddly rule, and this is a rule, not a tendency. But given the great fluidity of the Latin word order, it is a very useful rule. Here are some examples of agreement. Discipuli scelesti magistrum infelicem agitaverunt. The wicked students chased after the unfortunate teacher. Or this one. Magister a discipulo scelesto necatus est. The teacher was killed by a wicked student. Let's look at these examples of agreement. If the noun and adjective are both of the same declension, their endings may be identical. Have a look at the second of these examples, discipulo scelesto. In this sentence, the noun and adjective are next to each other, but there is no reason for them to be next to each other. They could be separated by quite a distance. Their agreement, however, is absolutely visible. You can see at once, by a wicked student. But you need to be careful when noun and adjective are of different declensions. Look at senex fessus. I'll repeat that it doesn't matter if the noun is from one declension and the adjective is from a group based on another declension. What matters is the agreement of case, of gender, of number. But look at senex fessus, the tired old man. Senex is a third declension noun. fessus is a group 1 masculine adjective. But because both words are nominative, masculine and singular, they are in agreement, though it may require a little looking to see that they're in agreement. Or look at this example, servorum audacium, genitive plurals both, of the daring slaves. Notice that servorum is a second declension masculine plural genitive, and audacium is a group 2 or third declension plural genitive, though its gender is not clear. You must find that by looking at the gender of the noun that it qualifies. Or if you return to the first example I gave up here, discipuli scelesti magistrum infelicem agitaverunt, the wicked students chased after the unfortunate teacher. You'll see that discipuli scelesti, those are in obvious agreement because they're both from the same group. But magistrum infelicem, magistrum, that is a second declension masculine accusative. Infelicem, that is a group 2 or third declension accusative, singular. Again, hard to say without looking at magistrum whether infelicem is masculine or feminine. These are the great majority of adjectives in Latin. Oh, where group 2 adjectives are concerned, there are one or two wrinkles, and you'll find those described sometimes at considerable length in your grammar. It will be useful to look these out, but it is not critically important. For the most part, if you are aware that there are a few variations here and there, you'll be able to deal with these as and when you see them. But although the great majority of adjectives in Latin are of the kinds that I have shown, there are a few notable exceptions. These are called mixed adjectives. If there were just one or two of them, we might call them irregular. But there are enough of them, and they are sufficiently regular against each other for us to give them a group of their own, and we call them mixed adjectives. Here is one of them, alter, altera, alterum, which means one or the other of two. You can call these 2-1-2 adjectives. Sometimes they are so called, but strictly speaking they are not 2-1-2 adjectives, and the reason is that sometimes the various parts of this are taken from the first and second declension adjectives, or the group 1 adjectives, and other parts are taken from third declension or group 2 adjectives. Or sometimes, as with the genitive singular alterius, they are entirely of their own kind. You can also see this with the second example I've given, uter, utra, utrum, which of two. This varies from group 1 and group 2 adjectives in exactly the same way as alter, altera, alterum. You need to be aware of these variations, and perhaps, although it is not an activity I'm in the habit of recommending, perhaps you need to learn them. No, I don't often recommend learning, but sometimes it is useful and sometimes it is essential, and I do suggest that you should learn alter, altera, alterum, and then you should learn, or you should be aware of those other adjectives, the ones following, that show the same pattern. And here are the others of that kind. Alius, alia, aliud, other. Nullus, nulla, nullum, no one. Ullus, ulla, ullum, anyone. Solus, sola, solum, only. Tortus, torta, tortum, whole, or entire, or complete, or total. No, total, take it as total. Unus, una, unum, of course one. So long as you learn either alter, altera, alterum, or uter, utra, utrum, you don't need to sit down and memorize all of these because they follow in exactly the same order. But it is important, indeed it may be essential, for you to be aware of those other adjectives which behave like alter, altera, alterum. And where they exist, which is not often the case, but where they exist, plurals are of this kind: boni, boni, bona. That is a perfectly standard 2-1-2 plural group 1 adjective. The last point I want to make, and this applies just as much to the comparative and superlative adjectives that I have yet to discuss as to the positive adjectives, is that an adjective, any adjective, is able to cross the border separating adjectives from nouns. Let's take this example in English. We start with the verb, men die. This progresses to an adjective, dead men. Well, you could say that that is a participle, a past participle. But, well, participles are adjectives, so we'll stick with dead men as an adjective. And then this adjective, or participle, crosses over further, or wanders further away from its origin, and it becomes a noun. The dead were everywhere. This is called nominalization. We do a fair bit of this in English. Well, we don't do it on a large scale, but we do it every so often, and when we do, it is very useful for us, and if it weren't useful, we wouldn't do it. But in Latin, it is done on a somewhat larger scale. Have a look at these examples. Magister multa dixit. The teacher said many. Many what? To which the answer comes back, things. When you have an accusative, neuter plural adjective like multa, and when it is not accompanied by any noun that it's governing, you take the unspoken noun things. So, magister multa dixit. The teacher said many things. Or have a look at this one. Discipuli non bonus amant. The students do not love the good. Now that's masculine, isn't it? That's an accusative masculine plural. What it means is, the students do not like good men. If you want to say the students do not like good women, you change the adjective. You change it from accusative masculine plural to accusative feminine plural. Discipuli non bonas amant. The students do not like good women. Or here's a good one. An entirely true statement. Pulchra in Britannia inveniuntur. Beautiful things are found in Britain. Here's a further point that came to me only after I had cooked the first version of this video, therefore the slight difference in the sound of my voice. I have said that quite often an adjective, particularly a neuter plural adjective, nominative or accusative, can be used purely by itself without specifying that it qualifies the word thing or things. But I should go beyond that and state this general rule, which I'll read. Man or woman or person may be omitted from a sentence when any adjective or participle implying that is used. We do this in English. The dead were lying everywhere. I looked at the living. You're using an adjective or a participle, and it implies that the adjective that the participle is covers a particular kind of person. So I looked at the dead, brackets men. I came back among the living, brackets people. It is exactly the same in Latin, and let's have a look at these examples. Start with this one. Bonus boni amant. The good love the good, or good men love good men. Giving an exact English translation of that is not entirely easy, but have a look at boni. It's nominative, it's masculine, it's plural, therefore it means the good men are loving. Bonus, it's accusative, it's masculine, it's plural, and so it means good men love good men. And you see, because these adjectives have genders and numbers as well as cases, if you say boni, then it quite clearly means good men. But let me move to the next example, which I think should show this a great deal more clearly. Iratai discesserunt. I've translated that as the angry women left. And you see, iratai, it does mean angry women, doesn't it? What else could it mean? It's nominative, it's feminine, and it's plural. Therefore, it already contains the idea of women who are angry, doesn't it? Remember, in English, adjectives are completely invariable. The angry man, the angry men, the angry women. The word angry in English does not imply any particular gender or number, or indeed case of subjects or objects. Whereas because these Latin adjectives are inflected, they can very easily stand in place of a noun. Since iratai already contains the idea of a number of women who happen to be angry, why bother saying iratai feminae discesserunt? It's a waste of words, and the Romans never liked to waste words. And so, iratai discesserunt can be taken as meaning the angry women left. The adjective iratai stands in place of a noun. Mostly you'll see this with adjectives which have come into the category of adjectives as participles from verbs. So have a look at this one. Magna pars audientium. A great part of those listening. I've given it down here as the majority of the listening people. Again, audientium. Who else would be listening? Trees, rocks, clouds, goats, sheep, fish? It's people, of course. And since it's obvious that the listening ones are people, again, why bother wasting your breath with another word? Audientium itself contains the idea of people who are listening. Or have a look at this one. Jacet corpus dormientis ut mortui. The body of a sleeping something, dormientis is a participle, singular genitive, doesn't have any noun to tell you what is sleeping, but the body of a sleeping something lies like the body of a dead something. But why should that sentence cause any trouble? Although there is no noun qualified by dormientis and no noun qualified by mortui, you don't need one. Here's the translation I've given. The body of a sleeper lies like that of a dead man. Well, that's not very elegant, but I'm sure you can do better than I can. But there it is. We're not talking about the body of a sleeping toad, are we? Well, we might be, but we're probably not. We're talking about the body of a sleeping person. And since it's quite obvious that we're talking about the body of a sleeping person, why not just let the genitive singular participle, dormientis, do service, not just as an adjective, but as the noun itself, and the same with mortui, which is a genitive singular masculine of a perfect participle. And so I think I've done something to illustrate the general rule that I give at the top of this slide. Man or woman or person may be left out of a Latin sentence when any adjective or participle implying it is used. And then the adjective will stand in place of the noun, or will so strongly imply that noun that the noun itself can be left out. And that is the end of this, the second and longest of the videos in my series of 6 videos on the Latin adjectives. Thank you for having stayed with me right to the end of this video, and I hope you will now go on to look at the other videos in the series. But I hope that you have found this video useful. So thank you again.